Elagabalus, the mad emperor of Rome. "The gods have sent us a monster," whispered the senators. They were right. Few rulers in history have burned so brightly and so chaotically as Elagabalus, the boy emperor who brought scandal, excess, and sacrilege to Rome in a reign so shocking that even his own guards could not abide him. He rose to power as a teenage priest from the east, draping himself in gold, perfumed with exotic oils, and proclaiming himself the earthly embodiment of his god. He forced the empire to kneel before a foreign sun deity, turned the sacred into the profane, and feasted while Rome trembled. But fate, like the fickle gods he worshipped, had other plans. Elagabalus was not born into the halls of Rome, but in the distant city of Emesa, modern-day Homs, Syria, in 203 AD. His real name was Varius Avitus Bassianus, the son of Julia Soemius, and a noble Syrian family that traced its lineage to the Severan dynasty. But his true inheritance was not political power, it was divine. From birth, he was destined to serve Elagabal, the great sun god of Emesa. As a child, he was inducted into the priesthood, dressed in flowing robes of purple and gold, leading grand ceremonies at the temple. To the people of Emesa, he was not just a boy, but the chosen vessel of the divine. But power once tasted is a hunger that never fades. Behind the temple walls, his ambitious mother and grandmother, Julia Maesa, were plotting something far greater than priesthood for young Varius. In Rome, Emperor Macrinus sat uneasily on the throne, his rule weak and unpopular. He had overthrown the previous emperor, Caracalla, who happened to be Elagabalus's cousin, and in the treacherous game of Roman politics, blood was a dangerous thing to spill. Julia Maesa, shrewd and cunning, spread whispers among Rome's powerful families. She claimed that Elagabalus was not only Caracalla's true heir, but that he carried the favor of the gods. Her words worked like wildfire. In 218 AD, legions in Syria, many still loyal to the Severan dynasty, declared the boy their emperor. Macrinus scrambled to crush the revolt, but his soldiers lacked conviction. When the two forces met in battle, they swiftly turned on their emperor. Macrinus was killed, his son executed, and Elagabalus, just 14 years old, was carried to Rome in triumph. Yet the boy who arrived in Rome was not what the Senate had hoped for. He was no warrior king, no statesman, no Augustus reborn. Instead, he was a perfumed priest, his face painted like a courtesan, his robes flowing like those of a dancer. Worse still, he carried with him a black, conical stone, the sacred symbol of his god, Elagabal. The Romans prided themselves on tolerance, adopting gods from the lands they conquered. But Elagabalus did not ask for tolerance. He demanded worship. The emperor decreed that Elagabal, the god of the sun, was the supreme deity of the empire, outranking Jupiter himself. He built a massive temple on the Palatine Hill, the Elagabalium, and ordered that the sacred relics of Rome, including the fire of Vesta and the shields of Mars, be moved there. It was blasphemy of the highest order. He paraded the black stone of Elagabal through the streets in a golden chariot, pulled by white horses, while he himself danced and sang in elaborate Eastern dress. Senators, consuls, and generals, all men who had once commanded armies, were forced to bow before the foreign god. But the young emperor had only just begun his blasphemies. If defying Jupiter was not enough, Elagabalus took sacrilege a step further. He did the unthinkable. He married a Vestal Virgin. The Vestals were the holiest women in Rome, sworn to chastity on pain of death, their purity a sacred bond between Rome and the gods. To defile a Vestal was to bring doom upon the empire. And yet, in a lavish ceremony, Elagabalus wed Aquilia Severa, one of the priestesses, proclaiming that their union would birth divine children. The Senate gasped. The people murmured. The gods, some whispered, would not stand for it. Elagabalus ruled not as a statesman, but as a debauched god-king. The empire became his playground, the treasury his purse. He hosted banquets so extravagant they became legend. He served guests dishes of peacock tongues and camel heels. He had couches stuffed with rose petals, so many that guests suffocated beneath them. He invited beggars to lavish feasts, then had guards mock them as they starved. He let wild animals loose among his guests just to watch them panic. The emperor himself dined draped in pearls and rubies, his face painted, his lips stained red. He dressed as a woman, called himself a queen, and declared he would marry the most well-endowed man in Rome. He built a golden chamber for his pleasure, where senators and soldiers alike were forced to play roles in his depraved fantasies. Rome had seen madness before. It had known the cruelty of Caligula, the paranoia of Nero, but this was something different. This was a man who had no interest in ruling, only in indulgence. The people grumbled. The Praetorian Guard, Rome's elite soldiers, began to watch their emperor with growing contempt. The people could endure madness, but soldiers could not endure weakness. Elagabalus had no love for war, no care for discipline. He insulted the army, replaced competent generals with his favorites, and neglected the empire's defenses. When rebellions stirred, he paid them no heed. He believed himself untouchable. But power is never safe in Rome. The same soldiers who had once cheered his rise now conspired against him. The Senate, weary of humiliation, waited in silence. Even his own grandmother, Julia Maesa, saw what had to be done. She had made him emperor. Now she would make him fall. In 222 AD, a plot was hatched. The Praetorian Guard, led by officers loyal to Maesa, stormed the imperial palace. Elagabalus, now 18, fled in terror, clutching his mother. But there was no escape. The soldiers found them hiding in a latrine. Dragged from his hiding place, the once golden god of Rome now sobbed and begged like a common criminal. The soldiers, disgusted, showed no mercy. They stabbed him, his mother, and his closest attendants, their bodies left to the mob. But even in death, Rome did not forgive. The soldiers cut off his head, paraded it through the streets, and then did the unthinkable. They threw his corpse into the Tiber River, ensuring that no tomb, no shrine, would ever bear his name. Elagabalus was erased. His statues were destroyed, his decrees annulled, his name stricken from official records. The temple of Elagabal was rededicated to Jupiter, and Rome breathed a sigh of relief. Yet his story could not be fully erased. He remains one of history's most infamous emperors, a boy priest who rose to power only to drown in his own decadence. His reign was short, his rule chaotic, his end inevitable. And still some wonder, what if Rome had accepted his god? What if Elagabalus had lived? Would the world have burned beneath the chariot of the sun? Would Rome itself have become a temple to madness? Some say the gods had their revenge. Others say Rome simply had no place for a god who wished to be a man. The waters of the Tiber swallowed his body, but his legend, scandalous and strange, would never drown. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest content.